Okay. Okay, so this is just the process, the overview of everything that's going to happen once we get that contract signed in our office. First, you're going to send it to us, your preferred title company. Again, Heather Schaefer, that's me. And then you'll also be sending, the buyer side will send a copy to the mortgage company. We're going to kind of go through what happens in more detail as we go through the slides, but we're going to first receive the contract, receipt it in, make sure that we have that earnest money and option money, open our new folder, open our new file. And then we're going to send it to our exam team. Our exam team is going to go ahead and open the search everything, search the restrictions, easements, all that good stuff. And then we're going to issue a title commitment. Then on the mortgage side, they're going to go ahead and do their loan application, do the credit history, get the appraisal done. And then once they approve the loan, it's going to come down to where we're all agree to close in our close date. Fun fact about closing dates. Do you know what the percentage is of files that close on the contract close date? It's less than 10%. Really low, because you're either closing before or after, right? It rarely happens actually on that date. That's a good target date is what everybody's working towards. But many times people are like, hey, we're ready to go. We want to go now. Can we close early? And that's when you're going to communicate with us, buyer side, and see what we can come together and agree to do. And then we'll get our instructions from the mortgage company at the title company. We coordinate all the documents, prepare our documents. Then we have our actual closing and funding. Okay, so now we're going to talk just briefly about title commitments. What is it? How is it created? What sources are searched and how long is that going to take? Typically, if it's an online county, one of the main counties, Travis, Williamson, Hayes County, you can get that back in 2 days. Now, if you're an off county that's like way out west somewhere or a border county, that can take 7 to 14 days. So make sure you are taking that into consideration when you're placing your orders and when you're doing your contract. Depending on where the property sits, depends on how long it takes for us to receive that information, okay? So what we're gonna do is kind of go through the title commitment, what it is. So Schedule A on your title commitment is, what are we gonna insure? It has the people's names, the amount, which is gonna be its sales price. It'll also have the lender information, if there's a lender for the buyer, and the loan amount. On Schedule B, we're going to talk about what's excluded from coverage, what we're not covering in our title policy. That's typically easements, restrictions, that type of thing. Then Schedule C is, what do we have to do to actually close? This is our little Bible. This is what we have to get done so we can close the transaction. And then D is just disclosures that are required by the state. It's really nothing that you guys have to be concerned with right there. Okay, so on Schedule A, this is what it looks like. You're first going to review your seller and or buyer's name. And if you open title with us and we send you out a title commitment, we're going to notify you if there's a problem before you even get the email from us. So you don't have to, you're going to review this, of course, but we're going to say, hey, we have an issue. We need to sort out, we need to fix. We're not just going to send it to you blind. Texas National Title is not going to just send it to you blind and say, figure it out. We're there to help you and be successful with you. So first things you're going to review is you want to verify your buyer's name. So if you are looking on here, it's going to have your buyer's name right about there. And then the contract sales price, just review your sales price, make sure all that's accurate. And then again, if there's a lender's information would be listed here. And then it again is going to go through the name on the seller, who the current owner is of the property. And that's what it's going to say right down here is who our actual seller is. And then it's going to give you the legal description to the property. Legal description is what we insure, not 123 Main Street. It's the legal description, okay? So you're not going to see necessarily the property address as your legal description, which I know you guys already have kind of gone over that, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that. So main thing is you're looking at who the title is currently vested in. You want to see your seller on there. Sometimes you might see a different spelling in a name. Question that. Why does the name look like this instead of that? Or did they get married? Did they get divorced? Did somebody die? How did they get the property? Those are things you're going to want to look at. And again, if you have those questions, reach out to your escrow officer. Ask them to help you. Hey, why does this look a little different? This is what we have versus what you have. And we'll be happy to answer that. And then also make sure that you are looking at your legal description. Your legal description on this document should match your contract, should match the tax certificate. All of that should match. A lot of time. Sure.
In the event that there's a legal description that is not accurate from MLS, the county or title, what would we do in that event?
So if we have something that is inaccurate, depending on what it is. So let's say the vesting deed is correct. Many times what people get confused and tripped up on is they'll see the tax collector or the property appraiser has a shortened, condensed version of the legal. Although it may still be an accurate legal description, it's just pieces of it together. So we're going to confirm with the vesting deed who has ownership. And if we need to make corrections, you might have to do an amendment to your contract to say it wasn't unit 101, it was unit 101D, things like that. So we will work with you on that to see where the error is.
Okay, so if we come across that error, we would just call title and then y'all would be able to direct us on.
We'll be able to look at it with you and say, okay, this is what you're seeing. This is why it's different, or this is what we need to do to correct it to make sure everything matches. So that's basically it. Main things, lots, blocks are sometimes missing off of legal descriptions, or the unit numbers sometimes can be missing. That's what is very common. And then anytime you have a meets and bounds description, which is a big parcel of land, again, you're going to see little pieces of it, not the entire thing. Don't be alarmed by that. We'll just have to compare and make sure everything matches up for you. Okay. Any other questions about the Schedule A? Okay. Okay. So Schedule B, like I said, this is just the exceptions, things that we are not going to insure on the property. Exceptions are, for example, restrictions and easements on the property. If you're in a community that has restrictions and easements, those are not insurable, so we're not going to insure that. And that just kind of gives you a brief overview. Of course, we don't insure bodies of water, things like that. And then we'll talk about area and boundary coverage. And this again is going to be a very broad overview. We do have a survey class that can dig you really deep down into this information. This is just a very quick and, slide talking about the survey coverage, what we cover, what we don't. So whenever you have a listing, you're going to get a copy of the survey from the seller and then have that T47 signed, right? And send that over to us with the contract. Actually, you're going to do that while you're putting the listing online, even before then. So if there is a lot of times we see people have added a porch on the backyard, or maybe they put in a shed and they're going to draw that on that survey for us. What we then do as the title company is we're going to send that into our underwriter to verify that we're okay issuing this additional coverage for the owner's title policy. Okay, so it's very important you get that over to us as soon as possible. The other thing I think Whitney was talking about, we do open title in advance if you need us to. So let's say you have a client who maybe there has been deaths in the family and they're not sure who all the vested owners are. We can open title before you even list it. That way we can kind of navigate problems in advance versus in a 45-day window. It's nice to have that done right away. So if you have one that you think could have some issues, get us to open title first. Give us that, let's work together and try to get it done. Okay. All right. Sorry, I went off on a little bit of a tangent. So we have to issue the error and boundary coverage. We have to have an acceptable survey, which again, I'd have to forward over to our underwriting team for verification. And then the cost is 5% of the owner title policy premium. If it's a residential property, if it's non-residential, it is 15%. And then we'll kind of talk about the discrepancies and the shortages or shortages in the area in the next slide. So we'll kind of scoot over there. Okay, so what are some examples of discrepancies, conflicts, and shortages, or boundary lines, or any encroachments, or provisions, or any overlapping of improvements? So an example is a landowner with improvements encroach onto your buyer's property. What could those improvements be? It could be a fence. It could be a concrete pad. There could be any number of things depending on where the property sits. And then, of course, we have to see where the boundary lines are. Does the new improvements fall within the building setback lines? Do they not? These are all things we have to look at. But this is, again, we're just trying to verify that we can issue this coverage to your buyer at the time of closing. So another thing that you might see, shortages in the area, that is more when there's a surveyor makes an error locating things on the property. They do make errors from time to time. We don't like that, but they do it. Or improvements that aren't even shown on the survey. Sometimes we get those in. Or fences that are not actually following the boundary lines. That's the number one thing we see, is the fences are just slightly over into the neighbors, or there's a slightly into our property. So here's some examples so you can just kind of see a survey. See where the fence is kind of going in. If you have that additional coverage, this protects the consumer. So that's why you want them to be as protected as possible, okay? And then, I'm gonna do this. This area, do you see this little green dotted line? I don't know if you guys can see that back there. That's the building line. So technically, the home should have been built behind it, but it's built in it. So there is additional protection for your buyer if it encroaches in that area. That's what the T19.1 coverage is any encroachments, any restrictions, or minerals. Another common occurrence is the conflict areas if you have acreage. If, let's say you have a 5-acre lot tract here, 5-acre tract here, and then the boundary coverage or the issue lies within the middle part. Who does that belong to? Again, that's when you get the additional shortages in the area coverage that will protect your buyer. And it's part of the contract, and most people get it. Most people do. So again, we're going to send you guys an email that just kind of says, hey, make sure you're reviewing your title commitment with us. And we're talking more on the buyer side. I don't know how many are listing and buyer or haven't determined yet. But this is more of a buyer side thing, is you're going to kind of, make sure you send them a copy of everything. When we send you our title commitments, you'll see the hyperlinks here. That means they can just go ahead and click on that and see what that restriction and or easement is. We hyperlink it right into our commitment. But if for some reason they can't see it, you can email us and say, hey, can you send me a full copy of the restrictions? A lot of my new agents that I work with now, they'll say, hey, can you send me those restrictions before I list? Because I want to attach it to my MLS listing. Can you send me any notice to purchasers? Because I want to attach that to my listing. We do all that for you in advance. Not a problem, free. We're not going to charge you, especially if we're doing the closing. So, of course, we don't offer, and you don't offer, any legal advice at any time. So then Schedule C, that is, again, what is telling us what has to happen so we can close. This is where you're going to have curative items. This is where we're going to have to clean up title. Maybe there is an error in the back chain and we have to have a corrective deed, or there's an affidavit that's required. If you see item 5, we have to pay off a deed of trust before we can close, so we can issue clear title to the buyers at closing. You'll see requirements for probate, if there is one, federal tax liens, judgments, if there's a divorce, and like I said, I already said the corrective. So who's responsible for clearing up the title? That is what we are going to do with your seller and you. And if we need to get you involved, I personally, I can't speak for everybody else, but I personally always get my agent involved. Hey, we have this going on. I'm going to go ahead and reach out to your seller, but this is what we have to do to get closed. That's very, very important. Okay, so now the commitment's been issued, we get to go to closing. And This whole back part looks pretty simple, but it's not. There's a lot that goes into it. A lot of records are searched. Because we have to verify that when we issue that title policy, we don't want any claims. We don't want any problems for anybody. Same with when we have to order the your homeowners, the HOA, I can't speak, resale certificate, sorry. I keep wanting to revert back to Florida. We called it something a little bit different. But anyway, that's also where we're going to order that. And again, verify there's no past due assessments on the property. Prorate any appropriate assessments so the sellers get a credit back. If let's say they paid for the entire year, then they're going to get back a portion of that at closing. So then again, we're down here, everybody has agreed to close. So what happens on the in-between part? We're going to always call your seller and buyer with a wire fraud call is what we call it, and send an email to just say, hey, wire fraud is huge, it's rampant. We do not text you new wire information. We're not going to call you and change our wire information. It is the same as when you have to call and ask us for it. And if it's a seller, we'll gather that information at closing. You're going to bring me a voided check, bring me your wire information from your investment account, wherever it may be. Do not send that to us in advance. We don't need that from a seller. Did I hit something?
Well, someone's trying to go in.
Oh, admit, I guess. Let's see. Anyway, so again, this is when we're going to get with the seller for curative items. Hey, we need to get a payoff for you. I need your loan number. When we get that contract in, we do send out a seller information sheet securely to them for them to fill out online that will ask for their loan number. It asks for any other solar panels, water conditioner treatments, water softener treatment, any of that. Or, hey, we need to have a copy of your trust document. Is there any IRS liens we have to deal with? We're going to ask kind of all those questions in advance. The other new thing that we are doing that isn't on a slide because it's so new is as soon as we get in a new contract, we send out a letter to the sellers saying, hey, we've opened title for you for the sale of this property. Give us a call to discuss. This again is to try to stop fraud. We send it to the property address, the address that's on the tax certificate, and the address on the vesting deed if it's different. If they're all the same, then we only send one letter, obviously. But again, it's a very basic letter to trigger them to call us. And that has stopped some fraud from happening in our office alone. I can speak, it has. So again, that's one of the other things that we do just to kind of make sure we're dealing with the right people. Also, our new policy for mail outs, we don't do mail outs for sellers anymore. They either have to come to the office or we'll do a remote online notarization. Are you guys familiar with that process? Ron, closing. So it's called remote online notarization. I'm one of the few in Hays County that does it. And we connect with them over the internet for them to electronically sign and have their documents electronically notarized. A lot of people think that that's not, or are concerned about the safety there. That's actually the most secure way because of the security questions that are asked. We don't create those. That goes by their credit report and by their driver's license information. They ask questions that no fraudster can answer. They asked me questions when I went through the training a couple months back. You know, the standard questions. Do you own this color Dodge Ram pickup truck? Okay, well, guess what? My husband's had 3. Two of them were on there. I was like, oh, the most recent one. and it was right. But you know what I mean? Like, it's designed to stop fraudsters from intercepting people's properties. So our whole goal is just to keep people as safe as possible. So yes, we do that. I have had 90-year-old people do it. Anybody can do it. It is not hard. We've had people in other countries do it. It is not a hard process. We will help guide them through it. We'll help guide you guys through it if you ever need to see the process and how it's done. Super easy. Protect, protect, protect. You just want to protect your people. Sure. Yes. Yes. I have had people who were out of state selling their property here in Texas. That's the most common, or they have already moved. I had someone who was physically moving from Texas and they were like pulled over in their U-Haul on their cell phone signing with me. I've had people who were, survivors of cancer and they didn't want to be in the office with people. Totally understand and respect that too. So yeah, we can do that for any of those reasons. We encourage them to come in. It's better if they can come in, we can see them face to face. We have their IDs. We have systems in place to verify the IDs, that they are accurate, they're real IDs. Again, fraud is not just wire fraud anymore. So our whole goal is to protect as many consumers as possible. It is $100. And that's faster and more secure than a remote closer, costs more money. You never know what you're going to get. With our Ron notaries, they're all employees of Texas National Title. They're all vetted people. You just never, your information is not going to be sitting out in somebody's car for 3 days until they get it to a FedEx or whatever. It's instantaneous. And then once they've signed to when we get it to the escrow team for them to disperse on the transaction, it's 10 minutes. So it's fast. For them to complete the process, I've had them go as quick as 15 minutes. And I've had people, again, I had a 90-year-old man. He was the cutest thing on the planet. He could not figure out how to turn his camera from his feet to himself. We struggled a little bit, but we got through it. But he took a little bit longer. So some people take a little longer, and that's okay. We're not, going to rush them, hurry. We know our audience and we prepare for that accordingly. But yes, $100 is what the Ron fee is. And then, like I said, it's super quick and easy. Okay, so I got off topic a little bit, sorry. Okay, so then what we need from you guys is your disbursement authorization. So y'all can get paid. That's the best part, right? We confirm your commission amounts, making sure we're collecting the correct amount on our closing statements. And then if you have any amendments to your contract, make sure you're sending that to us right away. If you have a transaction coordinator, make sure they're looping us in for all that so we can update sales price, change closing dates. Maybe there's going to be a credit versus a repair. We need to know that information. Make sure you're sending that to your title company so we can be prepared too. And then we also need special instructions about your clients. My clients are getting divorced. They hate each other. We need them separate, one in the morning, one at night. Again, we'll work with you, but keep us in the loop with that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Because we don't want to make people uncomfortable or say the wrong thing. We try to be very cognitive of all that. So, or people who are hearing impaired, maybe there's a language barrier. In my office in Buda, I do have Spanish speaking escrow partner. So if you say, hey, Heather, I need a Spanish speaker. I speak enough to be dangerous. So I don't try, but I do have a partner who can and say, hey, I can still handle your transaction and she'll still talk to them for me. We work together very, very well. Or maybe the person's hearing impaired or blind. I've dealt with so many different things over the years. We work with everybody. We see it all. Just work with us so we don't have eggs on our face and look stupid when I walk into a closing and they're like, they only speak Spanish or they're blind. just work with me and I will be happy to work with you. But again, and then we also are very flexible. So if you have a closing in Bastrop or somewhere else and you need us to go, hey, I really need you to go to my seller, we'll do that. As long as it's a reasonable distance. No, I won't go to Houston necessarily, unless I have something to do over there. No, I'm just kidding. But if it's within, a little bit, hour and a half, I've driven to New Braunfels, San Antonio. Yes, we do. We will work with you. And if we can't do that, like I said, the Ron is the other great option. And we've done that too. And if it's a buyer, we do have mobile notaries who we can send for buyers. We're just really cracked down on the seller side of it. Okay, and then what we're doing again during the process is we're just ordering those HOA documents. We order the home warranty for you. So you just need to guide your client on whichever warranty company you prefer. We have a whole list and we send the buyers an email too to gather information. And in that information, we say, hey, you have $500 to spend on your home warranty. These are the companies we see all the time. Let us know who and what type of policy you want. If they don't tell us what type of policy they want, then we go underneath that. We go just underneath that $500. So we'll get them the $450 one. If they do want the Taj Mahal, the diamond version or whatever, They just have to say, hey, I want the better version that covers this, this, and this, and we'll order that, not a problem. Seller's gonna pay that $500, they're gonna pay the extra $200 or whatever it works out to be. They just have to communicate that to us at the time. Otherwise, we just order whatever falls in that category for that company. Every company has different rates, specials. Every month they run different specials. So whenever you decide who you like for your home warranty company, you'll guide your buyer and just say, hey, use XYZ, they're my favorite. Okay. And then we set the closing appointment with all the parties. First thing we're going to do is send you guys a copy of the closing statement so you can review it. Once you've approved it, we'll send it to your buyer or seller. And then we'll also either communicate directly with the seller to see what time and the buyer works for them. Or you'll say, hey, I've talked to them and they want 4 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whatever time. If it is a loan, we encourage them signing by 3 at the latest so we can fund the same day, because it takes time for them to sign all those documents. We have to sometimes get funding approval from the lender. That takes time. So that's why we encourage that. And if we can, especially if it's a chain closing where they have sellers turn around and buying something else the same day, we try to scoot them all towards the morning. Again, that's where communication is key for us to communicate. Say, hey, they're buying something else across town. They need to close and have their money by noon. Can't guarantee it'll be done by noon, but we'll do everything in our power to coordinate it so it can happen that quick. The most I think I've ever seen at one time was 4. Did a 4-part. So I had first, second, third, fourth, all closed, all funded. It was a rough day. I drank my dinner, but anyway, but yeah, it can happen. So just communicate that with us. Let us know so we can work with you. We all want to look like Rosie at the end. We want to partner with you. Okay. So, the CD from your lender. Now, if you're on the buyer side of the transaction, lender is going to send CDs out multiple times throughout the transaction. The first one's usually, they like to over exaggerate the amount, so it's going to be a lot higher. And then as we get closer to closing, the fees get a little more distinct and correct. And then we kind of do the little dance, if you will, with the lender. We balance our CD with them. Then they sometimes are going to send out that CD before we have a chance to send it out. We can't really do anything about that. Depends on the lender. But and then sometimes we don't have that CD till the very last minute. It just depends. We try to get it done. I've been in this industry so long, we used to get the packets from the lender with the check like a week in advance. That was wonderful. Now I've had them literally hot coming off the press, and the papers are still hot when I walk in there for them to sign them. It just depends on the lender. It depends on the situation. Maybe there was a last minute issue that they had to get cleared, but we're still going to try to get it closed so everybody can close on time or as close to on time as possible. So again, we are mainly at the lender's mercy most of the time when it comes to that. The golden rule applies. Those with the money make the rules. Okay, so preparing for your closings, whenever you're doing your contracts, be very cognitive of heavy closing days. End of the month is always a huge closing day. Everybody wants to close by the end of the month, so they have a limited amount of prepaid interest they have to pay. People want to close by the end of the month, so it's on the month for the books for their commissions. Same with lenders. And they can be very, very busy. Fridays are also a very busy closing day because people have the weekend to move in. Oh, and then whenever we have a holiday mixed in there, that Friday before is rough. Everybody wants that 3-day weekend to move and to get situated. Totally understand that. And we try to make every accommodation for them that we can. Morning scheduling is always better, just to give time for us to get funding approved and to get those funds out. Again, we're still at the mercy of the lender. We may close something at 9 a.m. Seller signs at 9, buyer signs at 10, we're done by 11, and we don't get that lender wire until 4 o'clock. Our wire cutoff time's 4 o'clock, so we're scrambling to get it out. It's rare, but it happens. So just prepare your sellers accordingly, as it may not hit until their next business day. As long as we have all the money, everything's good. Also, just remind your clients, try to arrive on time. They have to have a current ID That's one of the big things we see people come in without a current ID. Make sure they have their voided check or their bank information. A lot of people don't have checks anymore. They can go to their local bank and say, hey, I'm getting a wire. Can you give me the instructions? And they'll print it out for you. If it is a wealth management account, investment account, Edward Jones, Merrill Lynch, they need to contact them in advance. What is on their little checkbook is not where that money goes. And they always get confused about that. Well, always write checks from this and goes to a different bank and then into their investment account. So they need to get that directly from whoever their investment account is. And whoever their banker is should be able to get it to them very quickly. And then we make sure the buyers have to call us for those wiring instructions. We're not just going to voluntarily give that out. If it's over $1,500, they can bring us a cashier's check that day, or they can wire. It's still 50-50. Some people love wire. They got to go to the bank anyway to get a cashier's check. And some people just prefer a cashier's check. That's okay. And then, let's say that's it. All right. So now everything is done. What are we doing? We're closing and we're doing the funding part. When we get to funding, we have to send all the documents to the lender for review if necessary. Sometimes it's the entire package. I had someone yesterday come in they were a little bit late to closing. They got there at 3. I was like, okay, if you want keys today, we're gonna have to sign pretty fast. And he did. He was able to sign pretty quickly. We got through everything. And by signing quickly, I don't mean here, just sign, just sign. We're still explaining what they're signing. You know, we're not just putting papers in front of people. So anyway, as soon as he signed it all, I went and took that to my funding team. She scanned it over to the lender. We finished signing the rest of our title docs and answered any questions and slowed it down a little bit for that part. And then once we have all the funds from everybody, the lender has given us permission, we're dispersed. So what happens when we disperse? It can be anywhere from an hour to the whole after all day. It just depends on how many wires are going out that day. Is it the end of the month? Is it a Friday? And the wires from the time they're ordered to the time they hit your client's account can be anywhere from 4 hours to 24 hours. Just depends on the time of day. And I've seen it hit as fast as an hour, sometimes a little less, but never promise something you can't deliver. We're very careful about that. And then always plan for keys. That's another big thing. Sometimes the agent will take the key out of the lockbox. Sellers leave all the keys, garage door openers at the house. That's great. And sometimes they look at me like, well, where are the keys? And I don't have the keys. I've never been there. So make sure you're coordinating that with the other agent all the time. Whether you're saying the seller's leaving all their keys and I've had people bring in a bag of keys. That's great. Whatever, we don't mind, holding it and giving it to them once we fund it, but just make sure you guys have made a plan for that. And then we go ahead and record those documents, the deed, and then the deed of trust if necessary. And then any releases, we go ahead and pay off the loans, of course, pay off any other judgments, liens that we found on the process, and we issue the title policy.